Good evening and welcome to the 445th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture-story Symposium. This is a weekly lecture series on comics, animation, illustration, and other text image work. It's funded by the Will and Ann Eisner Family Foundation and the New School. And this is Will Eisner Week, an annual celebration of Eisner's legacy and his pioneering work in comics and graphic novels. Tonight's panel is entitled The Comics versus the Fascists, and it will be moderated by Danny Fingeroth, who is the chair of Will Eisner Week. Danny Fingeroth is a popular culture critic and historian, having spent many years as a writer at Marvel Comics, a writer and editor at Marvel Comics. He's written books including 2019's A Marvelous Life, a biography of the controversial Marvel Universe co-creator Stan Lee. And his most recent book is Jack Ruby, The Many Faces of Oswald's Assassin, a look at this bizarre history-shattering figure. And Danny will introduce tonight's panelists. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Thanks for hosting us again for Will Eisner Week. And thanks to the Will and Ann Eisner Studio and Foundation. And here we are again. So I picked a relaxing topic for today, and these people were kind enough to come join me. So I'll read you the description, and then I'll read you their description, and then I'm going to read even more, a little introduction. But when fascism threatened the world in the 30s and 40s, comics creators rushed to counter its threat, including through their characters' actions. Will Eisner with the Spirit, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby with Captain America, and Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster with Superman were among the prominent writers and artists who used their four-color platforms to combat fascists both at home and abroad. Today, shining a light on the way these creators rose to the challenge and what lessons may be learned for the present is an expert panel including, in alphabetical order, Ari Kaplan. There's nobody with a lower letter than, okay. Ari Kaplan is the USA Today best-selling author of several books, including From Crack Out of Krypton, Jews and Comic Books, 96 Facts About Taylor Swift, and the I'm going to count everyone, and the Encyclopedia of Curious Rituals and Superstitions. He has also written scripts for numerous comic book series, such as Star Wars Adventures, Mad Magazine, and Bart Simpson Comics. Charles Kochman is editor-in-chief of Abrams Comic Arts and editor of the #1 best-selling series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. For 40 years, Kochman has edited several hundred books for all age groups, including award-winning picture books, middle-grade novels, retrospectives, monographs, graphic novels, and art book collections published by Abrams, D.C. Comics. Mad Magazine, Bantam Books, and Putnam. He is a recipient of the Inkpot Award presented by Comic-Con International for achievement in comics. I see what happened. This is okay.
Don't worry about it.
I wasn't reading it alphabetically. Karen Green. You know what? Because Dean had to be cute. Dean gives his bio and he puts his name in the middle of it. So the paragraphs doesn't start with a bold. So I got all confused.
Got it. So what kind of alphabetical are you actually doing?
I'm not. I totally screwed up the alphabetical. I'm going back to first grade, you know. Karen Green. Well, Ari starts with an A. Karen Green.
Right.
Sure, yeah. Alphabetical and first name, yeah.
Dean starts with a D and Karen starts with a K. So
yeah, Karen Green is the
I'm a librarian. I alphabetize.
Is the curator for comics and cartoons in Columbia University's Rare Book and Manuscript Library. She oversees the acquisition of archives, e.g. Harvey Kurtzman, Fly Orr, Bill Shelley's research materials and fanzine collection, and the expansion of the circulating graphic novels collection, which she initiated 20 years ago. Wow. She has been a judge for the Eisner Awards, the Pulitzer Prize, 4 times, the comedy category of the Bologna Children's Book Fair, and the Thurber Prize for American Humor in Cartoon Art. A comic about her career won an Eisner Award for Best Short Story for artist Nick Susanis. And last, but by no means least, and certainly not alphabetically least, Emmy and Ringo Award-winning cartoonist Dean Haspiel.
Woohoo!
That's my first name. You know that,
Billy
right?
Dogma and the Red Hook, collaborating with Harvey Pekar and Jonathan Ames, name dropper, and illustrating for HBO's Bored to Death. His published work includes writing and drawing for Marvel, DC Vertigo, Archie, Image, and Webtoon. In addition, Haspiel is an accomplished playwright and Yaddo Fellow. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, and you can get him at, he has a Substack page that's Dean Haspiel. And if that wasn't enough, I'm going to read a little preamble, because I figure this is kind of a serious topic. So
I was going to say that's all the time we have right now.
Yes, okay, thanks for
Coming together for this.
You probably figured out why we chose this topic. Okay, I chose this topic because it's all too timely. So what's our goal here, and why are we doing it as a Will Eisner Week event? Will was part of what's called the Greatest Generation. They pitched in to fight fascism abroad. A lot of us had aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents who were involved in the same struggles, who came from the same or similar backgrounds as Will, who came from immigrant families, many of them Jewish, on the brink of the war, or earlier in the 20th century. They saw their relatives who didn't make it to America die from fascism. But they'd also seen fascism creeping in this country, some of it coming from people who were famous and accomplished, like Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford. They knew it could happen here. Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Erwin Hazen, Jerry Siegel, Al Jaffe, so many others fought fascism either literally on battlefields or with their talents doing instructional comics here in the States. At least one comics artist, Jerry Robinson's friend, a guy named Bernie Klein, lost his life in battle. And many of them used the medium they worked in, comics, to fight fascism by creating inspiring and entertaining stories that kids and soldiers could read. So maybe we can take some kind of inspiration and sense of hope from what Will and his contemporaries did to try to resist the tides of authoritarianism that were challenging the world and that are never really that far away. I want to thank the panelists for joining in. So let's start by looking at some history and some of the amazing comics that responded to fascism over the decades. And with that, can people see the PowerPoint here?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll get to this story, but this was, the obvious thing would have been the Kirby Captain America punching Hitler, but this was so weird.
It is indeed.
A story called Swastika Over the White House. In case you hadn't heard about the World War II, it was in all the papers. Figure I got to set an establishing shot. I studied with Jim Shooter all those years. Nazis invading, more Nazis invading. There are Hitler and Mussolini. Hitler in the conquered Paris. Auschwitz, and then there were media. So there were media responses to the horrors, as there are now. I'm not going to go through a lot of them, but this seemed relevant, especially this photo, which is such a chilling and but wonderful lampoon. That's Charlie Chaplin and
Jack Oakey.
Jack Oakey. Yeah, I would have got there. So on to our medium. This is Siegel and Shuster, and before Superman, they were doing things for Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson. Anti-hate, anti-bigotry, anti-Klan. I mean, they don't have the pointy hoods, but so it was not a big leap, if you'll pardon the superhero metaphor, to Superman. And like a lot of the superheroes, Superman fought the war on the covers of his comics, but not so much in the actual comics themselves.
I've heard there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and you want to talk about that, Karen?
I don't know if it's widely known or if it's just something I read, but my understanding was that the powers that be didn't want Superman to get involved in fighting the war because it would inject a sense of unreal expectations. Oh, he goes in and done and dusted. It's over in a week, and it would be kind of maybe a small slap in the face to the troops who are over there fighting so hard.
I think that was a large part of it. At least that. Yeah. I think to have the superheroes literally fighting, even Captain America. There's only very few stories. What they mostly did fight was saboteurs and fifth columnists in America, who very often would take. I'm sorry.
And that's actually what most of the films were about. The Great Dictator is really famous, but there's 100, 1,000 probably films about people discovering espionage, discovering sabotage, discovering spy cells here in the States and combating them.
And to continue that, what they often found was people masquerading as business people or dare I say politicians who had other agendae. And so that's what Superman did that, and you'll see the Spirit also. So this is in this tense period when the United States this is just before Pearl Harbor, striving to rearm itself in all-out defense efforts. Sabotage of defense production and military objectives is of stunning effect. Therefore, when the mighty man of tomorrow discovers threats, he launches a battle against the saboteurs that will long be remembered. And Siegel and Shuster also did Superman stories where Superman gets himself involved with whatever the perceived as the good guys with fictional European countries, with people who this is gosh, if I could only be Superman for a few minutes, I certainly teach Oxnalia a lesson. And who doesn't hate the Oxnalians? And then here's Superman in that in a story coming up against a guy who looks an awful lot like Hitler, but he's not actually Hitler. But of course, he's a Hitler stand-in. And who Superman gets to punch in that fifth panel. So you can keep accounting of superheroes punching Hitler, because we can see a lot of that. This is another story where Superman and Lois, Clark Kent and Lois Lane, war correspondents for the Daily Planet. You didn't know they were war correspondents, are covering the conflict between Galonia and Turan as they walk through the streets of Bulgaria. Anyway, you get the idea. Jerry Siegel especially was very socially conscious and very progressive, but I guess either their editors and publishers wouldn't let them name real countries, since we weren't actually at war. They didn't want to do it. Nonetheless, Superman got in trouble. It was with I'm blanking. Was it Goebbels? Was the minister of propaganda?
Yeah, it was Goebbels.
Yeah, who denounced Superman and the Jewish Jerry Siegel in a Nazi newspaper. Superman's poisoning American children, irate Nazis claim.
Yeah,
Danny.
Yeah.
So the Superman stories you've been showing us, what year were they published?
These are from like 1940.
Wow.
They were before Pearl Harbor, but World War II had started already.
Got it. Okay.
And this is from this one from Look magazine with a special thing with special coloring. Superman's summer outfit, where essentially how Superman would end the war. I don't know. It's so weird why they would color it like this. I don't know, but Superman brings Hitler and and Stalin to the World Court, where and then this was a close up. Somebody colored it right, and this was sort of a interesting thing for these two Jewish guys to write. And look, I'd like to land a strictly non-Aryan sock on your jaw, but there's no time for that. I don't know why there's no time. How long would it take? You're coming with me while I want to visit a certain pal of yours. Put me down. These comics all portray Hitler. He's always like whining and pleading and complaining about being abused. I don't know where.
Yeah.
I don't know any analogies that would hold.
I wanted to, if I can interject something about
interject
that.
Away.
Okay, first of all, yeah, that Look magazine comic does sort of prove DC's point, even though they obviously got Siegel and Shuster to do it. I don't know if they used any of their ghost artists or anything, but Superman solves the war in 2 pages. He defeats Hitler in just 2, so that's kind of proves DC editorial's point at the time. But what's interesting about that too is that there are other characters in the DC's library of characters, DC stable, who were fighting Hitler or fighting Nazis at the time, like the Boy Commandos were doing it.
Oh, that's true.
And those Boy Commandos comics from that time, by the way, also depicted Hitler as this physically weak, ridiculous person, and so there really are, these cartoonists are really going out of their way to mock Hitler and show how ridiculous he is.
Ari, did the Boy Commandos go to Europe?
Yes, I believe they did. Yeah. They went, because there's one Boy Commandos story where Brooklyn, which he's called Brooklyn because he's from Brooklyn, and he falls in love with a Russian girl named Tanya, I think, while they're overseas, while they're fighting Nazis in Europe. So, because this is at the point where the Russians are allies.
I think all the heroes went over a couple of times. I mean, I don't know about the Boy Commandos, but they didn't go there. Captain America, most of his adventures were actually against like vampires and werewolves. Weirdly enough, Captain America was almost a horror comic.
Yeah, but in that first Captain America story, basically the person who's sort of the fulcrum for Captain America, for Steve Rogers becoming Captain America, is a saboteur. He's right. Like, provides the inciting incident, which is that he has infiltrated the Dr. Reinstein's. It's. And some of you might be very clever, and you might have figured out that Dr. Reinstein is actually supposed to be Dr. Einstein. Very cleverly, Simon and Kirby put an R at the beginning of his name. But a saboteur infiltrates the experiment, and he shoots Dr. Reinstein, and that's it's that way in the movie too.
So I'm getting a little ahead of the game here. After the war, I'm doing it sort of by character. So after the war, the Superman radio show had 3 anti-Klan. I think they gave them a different name, but it was basically 3 anti-Ku Klux Klan episodes. And now I know it's a little confusing to have a photograph about a radio show, but that was from a book that came out. And then just a few years ago, Gene Yang and Guru Hiru did kind of a comics adaptation of it, so here is Superman in a comic, or in a graphic novel format comic, fighting the Klan. And he's not punching Hitler there, but he's punching some kind of armored Nazi character. So we can imagine it's Hitler under there. So this comic came out I think like 5 years ago, but it was very interesting that after the war, DC was willing and to let the Superman show go in that direction. Although later on, I guess it would not take such a stand. This is one of the few Batman stories. Again, Batman. I don't think I've never seen a story where Batman has literally gone overseas to fight, but he's fighting a photographer Fred Hopper, but his real name is like Franz something, and he's a respectable newspaper photographer, but somehow the guys he's working for decided it would be appropriate to have a swastika chandelier. Nobody would figure out his true sympathies, because this guy is I think a wealthy industrialist, and so Batman and Robin saved the day. Here's one of the worst drawn Batman and Robin panels I've ever seen, but saved by a swastika.
And yeah, maybe you might want to rethink that caption, that phrasing.
Saved by a swastika?
Yes, saved by a swastika.
It's alliterative,
It is.
And it's literal. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
So if I'm reading the room right,
if
I'm reading the room right, the Nazis are the bad guys?
Your intuition is stunning, Charlie.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's the monocle. I think anybody wearing a monocle, if he's not Mr. Peanut, is a Nazi.
Yeah.
It's basically, and look, he kicked the guy so hard the monocle came out of his eye.
Yeah.
And then here's Batman.
Where did he hit him?
Well, he hit him a second ago, and then his head hit the portrait of Hitler.
Got it.
Yeah, the physics on this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, as opposed to all the other comic books we love. Well, and the anatomy on this is again an anti-axis cover. That's one of the more flattering Japanese depictions, unfortunately.
Who's the artist, you know?
I do not. Anybody?
Batman 18.
Yeah, I can't remember that one.
But it's funny.
Duran Taylor thinks it's Dick Sprang. Just wait in.
I don't think that's Sprang.
But I don't think it's the Batman and Robin could maybe be Sprang.
Yeah, Batman and Robin are probably Sprang, and somebody else probably drew the caricature.
Yeah.
Yeah, those don't look like Sprang at all.
I know Jerry Robinson was still ghosting at the time, so he could have inked it maybe. I don't know.
Or it almost looks Batman and Robin almost look like stats picked up from like another story and just slapped on there.
Yeah.
Well, they would do that. They had the same Shelley Moldoff pose that they would pose over and over. But yeah, the top part is too cartoony for Jerry or Dick Sprang. Trying to figure out who that is.
And again, here, sorry about the blurriness on this, but this is again, they're not in Europe. They're at a amusement park, and somehow Hitler, Tojo, and Mussolini have are at the park too. Don't ask. Wonder Woman was not to be left out. She was holding up the important bowling front, and so she got to punch a Nazi, but not Hitler. And it's funny, you think of Wonder Woman, especially from the TV shows, being all about fighting Nazis, but really there aren't that, they don't seem to be that many stories unless I missed them, which is possible. I'm happy to be corrected on any of this stuff. But certainly she fought her share of Nazis. Now the Submariner over at Timely Marvel had no problem finding Nazis to fight, and he turned against fighting the entire surface world to specializing in fighting Nazis.
The Grand Comics database has information on that cover.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome. We were all partly right.
Right.
So what does it say?
So it's basically Batman and Robin is Dick Sprang, but it's a pickup from an interior. That's why it doesn't look quite as polished as his covers do. And then the figures of Hitler and Hirohito and Mussolini are by Stan K, which were
okay.
Who, Charlie?
Stan K.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So here's the Submariner fighting Nazis, as he often did over at Marvel, Timely. And there's Jack Kirby, who I guess had, I tried to find a list of what cartoonists had served and how, and nobody has, that I could tell, has made a list, but Kirby obviously served, and was one of the few guys that went into combat and almost lost his legs from frostbite. If anybody doesn't know, Jack Kirby, the co-creator of Captain America and Fantastic Four and Avengers and X-Men, instead of a lot of the other guys, a lot of the other cartoonists, they would say, "Oh, you can draw, you can write, stay here in America and write propaganda and instructional stuff for us." Jack Kirby, they said, "You can draw. You're going to go ahead of everybody else in the front lines to draw pictures of the enemy installations." So he had a little tougher job than, and he seemed, if you know your Kirby history, he seemed well suited to that. Although,
Yeah.
Here he is with Joe Simon, his co-creator on Captain America. Well, and there's a young Stan Lee also. I guess I want to put that picture of Joe because Joe seems to be in uniform. I'm not sure what Joe's service was. And then there's Stan, who did stay, stateside, partly in the New York area, and then he went down south, but it was all writing instructional and informational and propaganda stuff.
Was Stan drawing at that time?
He is, yeah, yeah. Stan could draw pretty, was a decent caricaturist. Now, whether he actually drew that one or whether he's just posing with a brush, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's his original hairline, in case anybody was wondering. And there is, the archetypal Captain America punching Nazis, or a Nazi. Well, I always love this cover because it has a television in the back. And it has a television when they had to label a television so that you knew what it was. And it has a saboteur blowing up a U.S. munitions works that looks like the map of America. That's, sort of laying on its side. And Captain, even so, that one on the left is also by Simon and Kirby. Apparently, Hitler came back and tied up Bucky. But even after Simon and Kirby left in their argument with Martin Goodman, obviously Captain America, that was his whole reason for being, was to fight Nazis. Daredevil, not the Marvel Daredevil, battled Hitler. And there's the highly troubling
Hitler head,
right? There's several people punching the Hitler head, and then there's that highly troubling Japanese caricature in the lower right. The most terrifying battle ever waged. Hitler stacked the cards against humanity, but Daredevil deals the ace of death to the mad merchant of hate. Wow. Archie Comics had their superhero line, and the Shield seems to be. I don't see a swastika on the robot, but I'm assuming it's a Nazi robot.
And for historical sake, I believe the Shield was created before Captain America.
I think you're right because
I think so.
They threatened to sue Goodman over the original Captain America Shield because it looked like the Shield's outfit. Thank you for that footnote. And Captain Nazi was the villain in who fought Captain Marvel.
Very literal.
Well, I guess you can't mess around with Nazi. And
it's called Master Comics, because of the Master. I think they're on the wrong side of history.
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Does anybody know if those comics that were produced back then, were they monthly or quarterly, or does anybody know the publishing schedule?
I guess it depended on.
I mean, imagine coming up with so many punching Nazi stories, like over and over again every month, right?
No, I think some of it was there were paper quotas and paper shortages, so
right.
We're always trying to get around those.
Yeah, but Dean, if you and I had to come up with a punching Trump story every day, I think we could do it.
We could do it, and that's actually what's crazy about dealing with fascism in comics is like today we there's obviously people right now we love to punch, and yeah, like you said, we could every month try and find another way to punch out Trump or somebody, but it also shows like how it doesn't work. Superman wasn't as powerful back then as I think he is now. And yeah, you think, why doesn't Superman just go end a war in an hour? and they can't do it. And so that's where the line, there is a line, that you really can't cross in fiction,
Especially because
But
comics are so visceral,
he also operates in America, Superman. You don't see him really doing a lot of work in Europe or Asia or Latin America. He did
No.
handle those gun runners in Action One.
Except when he needs to be a war correspondent.
Because
Does anybody know anything about the war? Right? I'm sorry.
World when he's got a full-time job.
He doesn't want to lose his
Yeah.
benefits. Does anybody know about the War Writers Board? I was just reading about that today. Apparently there was, I mean, I think these guys would have been happy to do these stories, but I think there was some kind of coordinated effort with the federal government, sort of encouraging them. And I don't know about financing them, but there was some kind of cooperation. This is Will Eisner, who the week is named after, and the creator of The Spirit. This is Will in 1941. That's an early issue of The Spirit, the pre-war Spirit, as Pfeiffer used to call it. It was interesting. Eisner, The Spirit, like those other heroes, didn't do a lot of things overseas, although he apparently had an airplane that could fly to Europe. Had a car that became a plane that could fly to Europe. But this is about a refugee, a refugee scientist, I think, who comes to America, but is found by the Drachan, the secret police. He should have known better than to have escaped. I'm in America now. Axe Troll cannot touch me here. Correct, but you forget your daughter. So the Spirit gets involved. This is a different story where, again, the premise, and this is a teeny tiny panel I blew up on the first page. Amid the noise of stubby tugboats, the liner Aria docks in New York, unloading refugees from war-smashed Europe. This is 1940. Among them is the eminent chemist, Dr. Friedrich Hoyd, who was greeted by an old friend, Dr. Egel. And then this was something that happened in a Spirit story where he was fighting saboteurs, posing as respectable businessmen. That settlement settled it, gentlemen. I vote we make the Spirit confidential agent at large of military espionage. We will open all agencies of cooperation for his use. Later that day, and at the end of the last panel of the story, later that day, as the sun sinks behind the gnarled outline of Wildwood Cemetery, well, Ebony, I'm working with Uncle Sam now, working to preserve on Earth the one place where men may live in freedom and in peace, America, which was very nice. I don't think the Spirit being a confidential agent at large was ever mentioned again. But Will was trying. And this is probably the most interesting Eisner Spirit story. It's about basically Hitler coming to America. This is a story that came out in June 1941. A Hitler-like figure comes to America because he wants to try to convince people he's a nice guy. With his mighty army, he conquered all of Europe. In fact, he was so powerful, people trembled at the mere mention of his name. Thus he boasted, I can lick any nation on earth. Well, that sounds timely. Now, that was big talk. It sounded pretty funny to those who knew him when he was but a little corporal. But they were his stooges, and they just yesed him. So one day the dictator told him he was going to America on a fact-finding mission, and they just said yes. So he gets beaten up on the subway by some tough New Yorkers, and he ends up coincidentally at the Spirit's headquarters in Wildwood Cemetery. He says to the Spirit, you would make a good member of my secret police. No, I said I fight crime, not spy and betray. Careful how you talk to me. I am the leader, the conqueror. It is an honor to serve me. Why, you maniac, you're the world's most hated man. No, the people of this country admire me. I will go out to them now. Stand aside. There's a special bulletin. It's believed that the police are checking a spreading rumor that a well-known dictator is right here in America. Lynching parties of citizens are forming downtown. And he sees that the Spirit is right, and the Spirit convinces him to mend his ways. No matter how completely I enslave them, they will always remember their freedom and will always plot to restore it. I'll make a bargain, spirit. Give me my freedom, and I'll return to my country and halt the war, restore peace and freedom. Sold. And as night falls, the spirit's autoplane wings out to sea, carrying a reformed dictator. But it doesn't work. He's done his job too well in his unnamed home country, and you have become but a pawn, a tool of the men behind you. Without the secret police, a mighty army of our brains, you are nothing. You need us. We do not need you. And they bring in a double. You are promoted. From now on, you are the supreme leader of the master race. But remember, we are masters here, not you. So nothing relevant to today there. Eisner also created a character called Uncle Sam, who I have to confess I don't know a whole lot about, but he was punching Nazis. And Blackhawk, also punching Nazis in tanks.
Well, to clarify, by the way, he didn't create Uncle Sam, but he created the Uncle Sam comics.
Okay. Who created Uncle Sam?
Can't remember his name, but it was based on a British poster.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is it Flag, Charlie?
Flag did the drawing, but he based it on a British poster. But it was created. I did the graphic novel, so I should know this, but it's out of my head. But it wasn't. He didn't. Eisner didn't create the character of Uncle Sam for sure, or the image.
Oh, that's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And he was involved with creating Blackhawk. This is a controversial thing, but you know, here he is. Nonetheless, whoever created him, he's punching Nazis. Here's Will after he was drafted. 42 after Pearl Harbor, and he managed. And there's his ID card from working in the War Department. William B. Eisner. He's a chief warrant officer. And he worked at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, and he did cartoons for the base newspaper, the Flaming Bomb, which is a hell of a name. And he created, he put the spirit. He handed the spirit off to Lou Fine and Jack Cole and other people, and he realized that the Army needed him to do comedy, to do funny strips about a private dog tag, and then Joe Dope, who was a ongoing character long after the war. But Eisner realized, and the Army realized, that his skills could be put to use teaching people how to use their equipment so it didn't blow up in their faces, literally and figuratively. Don't be a dope, handle equipment right. Don't be a dope, handle equipment right. And so I think this was appropriate. I was reading as I was researching this that some people thought that it was inappropriate that he did it with humor, but it seems like when you have a civilian army of largely draftees, I think humor was the correct way to go. And then he started a magazine for them, or at least came onto a magazine called Army Motors, which was a similar instructional magazine, and then did PS Magazine up until probably 1970, that whole period between the Spirit and the graphic novels. Eisner was, I don't know if this would count as fighting fascism any longer, but certainly he put his shoulder to the wheel and put his effort and his skills in. Coming into the 1950s, a lot of these guys, Harvey Kurtzman and Wally Wood and Bill Gaines, were some of them were veterans of World War II and even of Korea. And they had probably the most socially progressive comics ever. So shock suspense stories. Here's a story about, I think the stories about immigrants being persecuted, about people suspected of being commies being persecuted.
Before we leave World War II behind.
Come on back, yep.
No, you don't have to go back. I just want to say, before we leave World War II behind, there were people doing anti-fascist, anti-Nazi comics, not just in America. And I can't see myself, so I can't tell if this is visible. But this is Calvo's Le Bête est Mort. This is the original French.
Wow, I can see it, yeah.
Translated into English. And you may notice that the wolves, the Hitler wolves, are different. That's because Walt Disney threatened to sue if he didn't change this animal because it looked too much like one from his movies. So this became the new. And it's comics in the way that like the Imagerie d'Épinal broadsheets are comics, like an image with a caption, an image with a caption. There's not a lot of speech balloons, but it's really beautiful and really graphic. Again, I can't tell if you can see it.
We can, yeah.
That's Hitler in a tank crushing little bunnies. Charming. So the subtitle is World War II among the animals. So he just, I mean, it was a influence on Spiegelman. He was aware of this.
Oh, that makes sense.
Way back in the underground days, and it very much informed Maus. So that's just, and that came out in 1944 in France.
In France, wow.
Yeah, it's in French.
The
edition.
So, what kind of condition was France in 1944?
Not good. Not good. Which makes it impressive.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, okay, so I'm just this is the EC, socially conscious. I mean, that's a pretty, even for a pre-code book, that's although it's funny, the guy's hands are colored pink, so I guess but certainly the first association you would make is with black people being lynched, but somebody's being lynched. It's not a positive thing, and it's a sort of Southern vibe to it. This is probably the most famous EC story, dealing with a Holocaust survivor who meets the commandant of the death camp he was in on the New York subway, written by Al Feldstein and drawn by Bernard Krigstein. Anybody have any thoughts on Master Race? I mean, it's a classic.
I have a couple.
Yeah.
First of all, I think what's interesting about the story is it plays with your expectations in such a brilliant way, because for a while you think that the guy who the main character that you're following for most of the story is perhaps a World War II veteran, an American World War II veteran, or a survivor of one of the concentration camps. But then you realize that the person who's stalking him is actually the survivor of one of the camps, and that the guy you've been following for the entire story is the commandant for one of the camps. And so it's this great reversal of your expectations.
You spoiled
it's
the
also
ending of this 75-year-old story.
I'm sorry. Spoiler alert from a comic from 1954, I want to say.
Oh, yeah.
I think so, around that.
55, I think, maybe. No, I'm not sure. I can say that I think that art should have stayed in America.
Where is it now?
It went up for auction a couple years ago. I got all these messages from people saying, Karen, are you going to buy it? Like, yeah, that's going to go for $1 million. I don't have that kind of budget. But it ended up getting bought by a Belgian collector.
Yeah, and it didn't go for $1 million, which is really
than $1 million. Yeah, it went for what, $650, I think, something like that.
Yeah, it got close because of the premium and all the other charges, but the actual hammer price was a lot less.
Just the page or the whole story?
The whole story. You would think that every page should have been. I mean, without question, the greatest comic story ever done.
Pretty much. But the Belgian who bought it, I met his agent at Angoulême a couple years ago, and he said that he's planning to create a museum, so it will be available for people to see.
But apparently the story I heard was that he wasn't even going to bid on it, and somebody told him it was a good investment.
They're right. So another EC classic story was Judgment Day. I guess they left out the optional E on Judgment.
The British versus American spelling.
Right. I didn't say it was incorrect. I said it was optional. It's about, I guess, an American astronaut who comes to another planet where the blue people and the orange people are at war over the color of their skin. And if he sees how foolhardy it is, and then the punchline is that, oh my God, the astronaut is a black guy, which was a major controversial thing in the 50s. And right, I mean, the story, I think maybe it was a code story at this point. There was all sorts of demands that it be redrawn and rewritten. And anybody know any more details about this story?
A little bit. It was in color, but I know the printer didn't, as from what I remember, the printer didn't want to publish it, didn't want to print it. He didn't want to do it because just on the grounds that he was racist. And so, at a black guy at the end, because the whole point of him being black, Tarleton, the main character in the story, is that the reveal is supposed to be that Earth is so far in the future that there's no such thing as racism anymore. And so Tarleton's gone to this other planet where there's warring tribes of robots who are different colors. Like
Uh-huh.
half of them are orange, I think, and half of them are blue, I believe.
Yeah, it's more about racism than fascism, I think.
Yeah, no, this
Oh,
this is
sort of.
definitely
Yeah.
definitely more about racism. And it's almost like a Star Trek story in a lot of ways.
Kind of,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so moving back to fascism. So now, and I realize I need to move more quickly through these. Um, World War II, as anybody who's seen a Marvel movie knows, or read a Marvel comic knows, World War II never ended at Marvel. And I think a lot of that is largely due to Jack Kirby and partly to Joe Simon and Stan Lee, but really a lot of it, Jack. This is an early Howling, this is issue number 2 of Sergeant Fury, who later became Nick, he became Sam Jackson, but the Howlers go to a concentration camp. They meet Captain America to show you that Fury was in but this was really every story Kirby did, you'll see, because this ended up being an Eisner and Kirby centric presentation. This is the Howling Commandos meeting Reed Richards during World War II. I think that's been retconned.
Yeah.
But at one point, all the Marvel heroes were like middle-aged guys who were army veterans. They were like they were 40-something guys, just like Stan and Jack. And this is where we first see Sergeant Fury come back. It's a character called the Hate Monger. He's not a nice person. But look at some of this dialogue. Those who are not with us are against us. They must be destroyed. We must drive all the foreigners back where they came from. We will show no mercy to those we hate. And then I think it's Sue says, Reed, it's unbelievable. He seems to have the crowd in a trance. They're actually agreeing with his un-American sentiments. So this is pretty good for middle-of-the-road comics that were put out for kids in the 60s. I don't know. I know it doesn't seem that daring, but it's pretty daring. Other people were not doing this.
There's that great Superman PSA that shows him standing surrounded by children, and he's going down the list
Oh
of
yeah.
things that are horrible, and he says, none of those are the American way. And it's basically everything that's happening in the world right now, in this country right now. When people accuse the big two of being woke, I just have to laugh, because they've been that since their formation. They've always posited that the American way is actually truly truth and peace and justice and tolerance, and their villains threaten that, and so the superhero has to set it right again.
And then here's Hitler, the victim of his own hate. But the story ends with this, which is, again, say what you will about Stan's overheated writing. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Until men truly love each other, regardless of race, creed, or color, the hate monger will still be undefeated. Let's never forget that. And Reed Richards' words never shall be forgotten. Not while the stars and stripes still wave, not while America endures. That's a pretty, 20 years later, and then around the same period, the Red Skull, who is basically has always been a Hitler stand-in, and Cap gets to punch him a lot. There is no master race, and we're all human beings, all equal before our Creator. Nothing you ever can say or do will change that. Equality, you fool. Equality is just a myth. And then an entire comic book worth of dialogue in this panel.
Panel.
This is one panel. Not a double splash. This is a 1/3 of a page panel. And he said the only way chance to make him lose his temper is to make him lose his temper, because the Red Skull, I think it's where he has the cosmic cubes. He can do anything. You're always a loser. Your own Third Reich was reduced to ashes by the very forces of freedom you so despised. No, those are lies. The war has never ended and never been won. It was only the first battle. So long as evil lives to muster the forces of bigotry, greed, and depression, the fight goes on. And so on. But this, I don't know. I'm getting teary-eyed reading this. And then just thought I'd show you the skull from the movies where he's got a Hydra patch, which at one point, this was a whole controversial story several years ago, fairly recently, where we thought Cap was hailing Hydra. He got better. This was and the I guess one of the founders of Hydra, and somebody I'm sure will correct me, Baron Strucker is fighting Nick Fury, and then years later, again, this is a double page spread. Nonetheless, this is a hell of a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
And Strucker is basically fascism reincarnated. And I'll just zoom in on: you and the cursed Americans won the first battle. Now we wage another war, a war between the legions of Hydra and the entire free world. This time, however, it is I who shall emerge as the victor. I, Baron Strucker, in case you don't know who he was, former commander of the Nazi Blitzkrieg Squadron. But I mean, even when I was 12, this blew my mind. It's still blowing my mind.
Great splash page.
Right now. But this is the eternal battle at Marvel Comics. Dr. Doom is essentially a fascist dictator.
Yeah.
I wonder what your long-dead Fuhrer would have given for an army such as mine. With such a force, he might have swept the world. Tell me, Hauptmann, am I not the greatest military genius of all? How come our politicians now speak like Dr. Doom? Dr. Doom has no rivals, none. Did I not capture you from the Red Skull? None can rival Dr. Doom in total mastery of the diabolical. And here, Dr. Doom says his next objective shall be the destruction of an entire village. So just for Kirby, if you believe that he plotted these, which he probably did, it never ended. The DC was doing its share too. Sergeant Rock was fighting the Nazis, and Sergeant Rock. This is one of the most famous Sergeant Rock stories by Kanigher and Kubert, I think, where a Nazi ends up being saved by a black prisoner of war's blood transfusion.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody? Any thoughts? Anybody? I don't want to.
He did that again with Superman and Lois Lane. I Am Curious Black.
Oh, that's right.
He liked that
Well,
idea.
but also, even up to World War II, there were some doctors that thought that you could not have a blood transfusion between a black person and a white person. There was that whole racist mythology of like that they're too different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sadly, that has a basis in truth.
And so the X-Men also were constantly. I mean, these are the Sentinels, who are mutant hunters. So you can substitute Jew hunters or Gypsy hunters, and then they take over from their creator. Magneto, in the early days, before we found out he was Jewish, I mean, the imagery is not exactly subtle here. Magneto takes over a country and decides to dress his soldiers as Nazi stormtroopers. Could not be it could not be more overt. Is it necessary to plant such fear in the hearts of the people, Magneto? Of course, humans are like sheep. They respond to certain stimuli, and fear is one of the most potent. Later, we found out Magneto is Jewish. Well, and he was fighting Baron Strucker. We find out he was a Holocaust survivor of Auschwitz in the X-Men, and that it sort of brought to the fore the X-Men metaphor of Holocaust and Jews and Gypsy Roma persecution in the movies as well as the TV shows. This Days of Future Past was about a future where mutants are hunted in New York and America like Jews during the Holocaust. Kirby switched over to DC, but his focus on on fascism did not end. Here's an orange-haired guy speaking nonsense. I hear you right. I hear you right, thinkers, says Glorious Godfrey. You're shouting anti-life, the positive belief. Wield death, wield pain. You can be justified if you wear one of these. Judge others, enslave others, kill others. Anti-life will give you the right. Yes, friends, though life is ever filled with those who threaten us, it is anti-life which gives us the power to eliminate them. The Holocaust is coming. He's talking about a different Holocaust. The day of Darkseid, who brings this power for only us to use. And this is Kirby's impression of people under the spell of a mesmerizing, charismatic lunatic. He's voicing what's in our hearts. Tell it, Godfrey. Tell us how our pride is being attacked and dragged in the dust. It's the others, Godfrey, those who don't think right. This is our world, our world. They have no right to meddle with it. This was written last week, right? Any thoughts on this panel? This is
Well, it's hard to deny that, like, and I'm not the first person to say this or to hypothesize about this, that I don't know if Jack Kirby ever talked about this in a press interview or anything, but it seems to me that he was very much working out something that he had experienced during World War II, his feelings and thoughts about World War II in the Fourth World stories, in the New Gods and Mr. Miracle and Forever People stories. Because, I mean, first of all, there's all this sort of Nazi-like imagery when you go to Apocalypse, when you have then the dark side scenes, dark side. His name is spelled in sort of Germanic spelling. It's not S-I-D-E, it's a S-E-I-D.
what
He's
about
wearing a
Desaad?
helmet or what?
What about Desaad?
Yeah, there's Desaad, and then there's the fact that he's got those slogans which are not that different. The slogans on Apocalypse, which are like "Live for Dark Side, die for Dark Side." It's sort of like "Work will make you free." It's very similar. So it just seems like it's sort of Jack Kirby's impressions of
Yeah, but I think
Nazi occupied Europe. What?
and I think Jack thought that it was an important message to keep following through on,
Yeah.
and I think sort of for all its corporate ownership, which we can talk about, Marvel still seems to have some loyalty to that message. I just put this in here. He looks like some figure in the news that
Stephen Miller.
it's really frightening, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really Jack. Really, God.
Because it's a sniveling weasel is a sniveling weasel. So
great eyebrows. Moving into the Will Eisner's graphic novel period, Will also, in this very autobiographical novel, still, and certainly it's about it. I mean, it's all about the war and fashion. It's about his memories of being a soldier, but there's this figure that he comes across, kind of ranting on about the revolution, but he's not without some serious motivation. See, here in America, you see nothing. It is all peace and prosperity, a golden land with a rotting core. Yikes. In Germany, it is just beginning. There we can now see the class struggle clearly. Social Democrats, Communists, Socialists, National Socialists, all fighting for power. Now it is only 11 years since the revolution in Russia. Already it spreads across Europe like a storm. In the end, the communists and Nazis will fight for power and control of Germany. It will be a bloody fight. If the Nazis win, that will be the end for the Jews there. You'll see. You'll see. And what will we do here when that happens? This is pretty intense. This is based on people Will knew and spoke to as a child. And so, of course, Will's ultimate statement on fascism and anti-Semitism was his graphic novel, The Plot, debunking the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Whenever one group of people is taught to hate another, a lie is created to inflame the hatred and justify a plot. And it goes through, have you seen Gottfried Zorbeek's Protocols? It's a success. Has clearly identified our enemy with the public. I see Beek uses the protocols of the Elders of Zion to show the Jewish plot to control the world. Make sure that Hitler gets a copy at once. You will want to study it. And then they find that the Allies rummaged through documents after the war in 1945. Evidence of the influence of the protocols was found by American intelligence. So this is Will also sort of carrying a similar message of Kirby to stay vigilant, I think. Anybody, any thoughts on the plot or on Will's later work? Okay, well, I'm getting down. We're almost to the last 100 slides. The underground phenomenon of the 70s, which led to what we have today, Trash Man, was Spain Rodriguez's, I think, communist hero. Anybody know much about Trash Man? Charlie, you know much about the Trash Man history?
I don't.
Well, anyway, this was, when Crumb when Crumb and S. Clay Wilson and everybody were doing their thing, Spain, you shall henceforth be known, the origin of Trash Man. You should be known as Trash Man. Take what we give you and go forth into the world. The humble and oppressed, their fight shall be yours. Take what I have taught you and go forth. Ben, did you know Spain or much about Trash Man? Okay, we'll come back to that. And then, of course, the most well-known of the Holocaust stories. I wouldn't call it a memoir. It's a kind of a memoir. Is Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is really chilling. I mean, I have to say, not to hammer it home too many times, or maybe you can't hammer it home too many times. Seeing sort of innocent civilians, Jews, even though they're depicted as mice in Nazi Germany, seeing things change is really chilling and, feels way too familiar.
And Miriam Caton's We're on Our Own.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, that's another really powerful indictment of the consequences of fascism, where she and her mother, and she was born in like 42, so she was only 3 years old when the war ended. So she and her mother were on the run, and her mother eventually took up with a Nazi officer because he could protect her and make sure that she and Miriam had food. And she hated herself, but you do what you have to do to survive sometimes.
Dean, you were the one who, thank you, Karen. Dean, you're the one who encouraged me to put Berlin. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, this is Jason Lutz, and I don't know, I think he worked on this for like 10 years, through comic book, publications until finally it was collected and when it was finished. Excuse me. And it's about I think it's about I haven't read it in a while, but it's like a poet and an artist, or it's just the beginning. It's like a romance story, but it takes place in Berlin as the rise of Hitler happens, and it's like watching it how it could happen. Just like right now, every day in America, we're like, is it going to happen here? Like we I think that some of the things we don't talk about is what is the end game? Like every day our president does something, we're like, what just happened? And everyone's trying to figure out, well, what it feels like big giant distractions towards something that we're not supposed to be looking at.
Yeah,
And I feel like, right? And so what Jason Lutz did is put something together to show you how this could happen right before your very eyes, and what kind of power you have and don't have. And, it's really hard to punch out Hitler in real life or punch out Trump in real life. So you have to do it in comic books, and it's like a little flag for us to wave for us who are all upset and angry. And that's why we have these, but it's also super unrealistic, so you have to make up hate monger, except you don't have to make them up. There are hate mongers, obviously. And so, but to me, that's where comics excel, is when you can create these, Red Skulls and or the complication of a Magneto. I said Magneto. I never understood Magneto. That sounds corny to me. Magneto sounds more masculine to me. Sorry. But I don't know. It's weird. This whole presentation, I haven't thought about this in a while. And then I keep thinking about the 9/11 Spider-Man comic book where, all the heroes and some of the villains show up at the Twin Towers that are decimated and just rubble. And there's Dr. Doom crying. And like, on the one hand, I get the sentiment, but the other hand, it's absurd. Like, it's just, so I don't know. Comics are fascinating for expression, of course, and then trying to come up, with adjacent, villains and adjacent storylines, because the thing that I'm learning here is that it's evergreen. This is going to happen again and again. And I was also like fascinated by the fact that when World War II started, I guess they were like, okay, everybody, let's go to war. But hey, cartoonists, we're going to start a newspaper and we're going to make you make comics and drawings. Like, when a war starts, does anybody know how long it's going to last? But obviously they were like, oh, we're going to put you to work and we're going to do a newspaper for the troops. Are they doing that these days? No, I don't think so. It's very strange, all of it.
Well, because this stuff was in another country, but we're dealing with stuff that's here. So
yeah.
There's
Well, and we've been like our bubble was burst on 9/11, right? I feel like suddenly things got a little strange. Like, wait a second, this could happen here, and now we have an administration that's not even asking permission to do what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good segue to the next thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, please.
Charlie. Yes, you got a book.
No, not to interrupt you, Dean, but I think you set it up, because I think one of the things that, as a publisher, I don't want to publish anything about Trump because I don't want him on my list. I don't want to, and by the time you do a book, by the time it comes out, the news is old. So, how do you do something? So I don't know if anybody read My Friend Dahmer or Trash or Kent State, but Derf Backdraft, who did a comic strip called The City, this is his new book. It comes out this fall. And I have a little spiel about this because I've been literally putting the finishing touches on it. But wait, before you go through the slides, just stay on the cover for a sec. One of the things about when Trump took office the first time, Durf and I started talking about where this could lead. And we started to go back in time a little bit because, like Shakespeare said, past is prologue. So what we did was, because Durf is a journalist, we started thinking and doing a lot of research about 1916 and what that means now. And when we started working on this book, which was 5 years ago, we had no idea how relevant it would be. But if you let me do just a quick spiel. But in 1916, Woodrow Wilson's president. He's a Democrat, but this is before the parties, changed and evolved into what they are now. Wilson was a white supremacist. He had open contempt for the constitutional rights. And when he came into office, he was pushing the boundaries of what the presidency could be because he was an authoritarian. He had authoritarian tendencies. He ran on a campaign, America First, and no foreign wars. But once he becomes in office, the U.S. enters World War I. And at this time, workers are coast to coast. They're starting to unionize for the first time. And they're met with billy clubs, bullets, and by the police. There are private militias from the oligarchs who own the factories, the farms, the mines. And this was the part that I knew nothing about. There's a reactionary militia that was founded called the APL, the American Protective League. They boasted 250,000 members, and they ran rampart through the American cities. They all had the blessing of the White House and the local police. They would attack anyone in the group or any group that they felt was unpatriotic. At this point, the Espionage Act is enacted. It criminalizes any speech that is considered to be anti-government. Wilson puts this through. The administration also uses this law against militant workers, socialists, pacifists, unionists, and immigrants. And he wages a war on what he called at the time the hyphenates. These are Irish Americans, Italian Americans, Asian Americans, Jewish Americans, African Americans, anybody who is different, anyone who was not born in the US, and anyone who he described as the other. At this time, there's a growing radical opposition of dissidents who fight back, and they speak openly about revolution. And these numbers swell because they're mostly populated by European immigrants who poured into America. And those are the ones who had fled the iron hand rule of like kings and generals. And this conflict spills into the streets, bombs explode, riots flare. Here's where it gets interesting for me was while all this stuff is happening, there's a small group of political cartoonists who are at the center of all this. And they create a magazine called The Masses. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what Durf talks about a little bit. And the next few slides is this magazine.
Sorry, Charlie, wait.
No worries. Magazine called The Masses, which probably the equivalent of something like the Village Voice or Time Magazine, but it was subscription only, done through the mail. It was folded so it fit in an envelope, and it had all kinds of political cartoons, writings about what was going on. And it was what's that?
It was a socialist magazine. Max Eastman, the editor, was a socialist. Art Young, the main cartoonist, was a socialist.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But what you find out is that The Masses is, home to some of the greatest dissident journalists in our history. But as a result, they terrified the authorities. And so what happens is this patriotic mob that's whipped into a frenzy by the government propaganda and a subservient mainstream media, they howl for the heads of the cartoonists in The Masses, and they put them on trial for sedition, not once, but twice. So if this sounds familiar, what Durf writes at the beginning of the book is we've been here before, but we forgot. And he's reminding us that it's time to remember. But I think that so why did Wilson go after cartoonists and particularly this magazine? So two things to point out. I don't know if people know that Napoleon was not really short. He was average size, 5'6". James Gilroy, who was a cartoonist in the UK, drew Napoleon as a little baby, like a crying baby. And Napoleon on his deathbed is quoted as saying that Gilroy did more harm to me than all the armies of Europe. And then more famous was Boss Tweed, who wrote, I don't care what they write about me in the papers, my constituents can't read, but damn it, they can see pictures.
Well, that was a whole plot point in Citizen Kane, right? That they drew a humiliating cartoon of a politician.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And, so this magazine, ultimately, the government makes it impossible for this magazine to be mailed. Again, puts them on trial not once, but twice for sedition. Eventually, they do get acquitted, but just barely. But lynchings are happening. There are cartoonists that have to, go in exile and leave the country. There are cartoonists who spend time in jail, which we talk about in the book. It's pretty harrowing, but everything that you sort of see in this playbook of this APL, the American Protective League in particular, the reason I know that people like Steve Miller and Bannon are aware of it is because when we started this book, Durf did all this research, and he pulled all this stuff from the government websites. There was a whole bunch of stuff on the government website about the APL, because basically they tried to put as much information out there to show that the government wasn't like that anymore. So we're going to be transparent. We're going to put the names of all these people up there. We're going to do all that. So all this research was up there. When I was editing and copy editing this book, I was fact checking every detail, and we have 32 pages of notes in the back that annotate everything. Every single item about the APL that was on the government website is now removed. It's all been scrubbed clean. That's not a coincidence.
No, it is not.
So,
this is amazing. Charlie, you're reminding me of, there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Civil War.
yeah,
And there's like a scene with a soldier pointing his gun toward someone, I think a person of color, and he asks, "Who are you?" And the guy says, "I'm an American." And he goes, "But what kind of American?"
yep,
And that's what we're dealing with right now, right?
yep.
And this kind of stuff. And, you know, we thought we had freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I don't know anymore, you know. But what's also amazing is like that Masses paper, like we didn't have the internet back then, or cell phones and all that. That was, you had to print, publish, and distribute, you know, back then. So it's so fascinating, all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that, you know, we're living through this time. I mean, you know, had no idea, and Durf, I know he didn't any more than I did, had any idea how relevant it would be. But I think our only saving grace is literally that, you know, contrary to what Trump said about, you know, knowing all the best people, you know, we're, other than somebody like Bannon and Steve Miller, who do know what they're doing and are very purposeful, the rest of them are a bunch of idiots, and that's our saving grace, and that's probably, you know, ultimately what will save us. So.
Well, I keep thinking that what's going to happen is it's his own people. You know, eventually it's going to be the people inside. They're going to just like fight each other somehow, and then it'll collapse, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think if, you know, I hate to say this, you know, because I've been wrong before, but it feels like they can't cancel elections because even if he tries to, because it's in the Constitution. But, you know, it's also in the Constitution. You can't start war without Congress. You can't destroy the White House without Congress.
Right.
There are a lot of things. So, you know, I hold out hope that we do have them. I think that's a bridge too far to cancel an election, that the entire country will just go along with that. Even his supporters, which are dwindling.
You can't cancel them. You can screw with them.
Well, oh, for sure. But I think that if they get trounced in the midterms, which they will in a fair election, I do think that everybody peels away at that point because he's outlasted his usefulness. He'll be a lame duck president, and at that point, take control of the House and the Senate. I hope that, you know, Chuck Schumer gets out of the way and lets, you know, younger people take control, and there are like Nuremberg type trials for all of this administration. Because if you normalize it and just sort of like, you know, try to be like, well, you know, like, you know, that was then or whatever, it'll happen again. So I think if we have the House and the Senate, we can pass, you know, laws, not executive orders, because the executive orders are meaningless except now. It would be great for them to actually pass laws that would codify, you know, what they call the truths that are self-evident. They're so self-evident that we didn't need to define them, but apparently we do.
Can the Supreme Court have an army? I think that would be good.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court needs an army so that we can actually enforce rulings. You know, that's what I'm.
I think we got to expand the court because it's within our rights to do it, and clearly it's not a balanced court anymore, and it's a compromised court. Because Clarence Thomas's wife and Thomas and Alito.
Well, there is that. Yeah.
So anyway. I'd like to. I'm sorry, Charlie.
No, I was just going to say sorry for the soapbox, but I felt like
no. That's why do you think I invited you?
Absolutely. But were you going to say more? I want to make a little pitch for something too, even though it's important.
I'm done.
So, Danny, you mentioned that I was a judge in the comics category at the Bologna Children's Book Fair. Was almost exactly a year ago. And the comics category was separated into early readers, middle grade, and young adult. And we had to pick a winner and two runners-up from each of those categories. And there was a book that I fell in love with in the middle grade. Not for adults. This is for, you know, 6, 7, 8 graders. It was part of an initiative by the former left-wing Portuguese government called Mission Democracy. And they were going to be putting out a series of 12 books that all dealt with some aspect of democracy. This book was the fourth one. The first three weren't comics. It wasn't a necessity that they be comics. It was just a necessity that they be aimed at this particular demographic. So there was so this Portuguese comic number 4 in Mission Democracy was called Ditador, which is Portuguese for dictator. And it's basically a manual on how to recognize, understand, and resist fascism. So this is it. Again, I'm not sure if it's visible because I can't see myself.
It's visible.
Okay.
Lift it up a tiny bit. Oh, that's good. Perfect.
Okay. And it's again like The Beast is Dead. It's that kind of European style, large picture with caption. Not a lot of. Can you see this side?
Yeah.
He uses red as the color of fascism. So whenever you see red appearing, you always know you're in the presence of trouble. And I just thought that this was brilliant to make this available to like 11, 12, 13-year-olds, because you got to train them young. You know, they're getting trained in all sorts of other things by their parents, their churches, their schools. But if you make a beautiful book like this that tells a really compelling story, you might actually reach some kids, and it would be really nice if this was in English, translated into English, and we could make it available to kids in schools and communities here. Because people are still fighting this good fight all over the place. This book came out from Street Noise this year. You Must Take Part in Revolution.
It's a great.
I'm sorry?
It's an amazing book.
Yes, it is indeed.
I interviewed them in Miami at the book fair, and I besides just being completely blown away by them and their talent, they gave us a blurb for Durf's new book.
Oh, nice. Perfect. That's perfect. And in my library, we've got an anthology that Paul Buell co-edited called Partisans, 100 Years of Resistance and Anti-Fascism. You know, this is not a new movement. This is something that has lived in this country for so long. And it's a kind of, I would say, well-known fact that visuals are extremely effective ways to convey messages to a large public. When I go on my No Kings marches, I always have a placard that has one of Steve Brodner's images or one of Peter Cooper's images or one of Nick Souzanis's images. And people are always stopping and go, oh my God, that's amazing. Because people don't want to have to read, you know, so you give them something visual, even though there is some text in here. You give them something visual, and it connects with this almost primeval part of the brain that is used to looking at things and understanding the world through vision and understanding what you see. So I think that it's very natural for cartoonists to take on fascism. I think cartoonists have been doing it for a very, very long time. And they will continue to do so until they're all rounded up and put in one of Red Skull's camps. Or not Red Skull. Who was the one who looked like Stephen Miller?
Desaad.
Desaad.
And by the way, now that you mentioned that, I feel so foolish for not realizing that Stephen Miller basically is Desaad until you pointed it out. But
well, that's why we have visuals to go along. So
yeah.
I know Dean has just wanted to, because we haven't had a Hitler punching for a while. Cavalier and Clay, of course, the opera. There's not only did they do a comic based on the superhero that Michael Chabon created for Cavalier and Clay, but even in the opera.
Oh, nice.
Right.
I don't know if that's Hitler, but let's imagine it is. Yeah.
It's a Nazi.
It's a Nazi
of some sort. It looks like, anyway.
Oh,
Can I just say something about that
Sure.
that first Captain America cover that this is all homaging and spoofing
Right.
is that I don't have any way to know whether I'm right about this, but it seems to me that in a way that cover is Joe Simon and Jack Kirby's attempt to do a political cartoon.
Oh,
It
yeah.
seems to me that in a way, it's their way of like Karen and Charlie were just saying a couple minutes ago, of doing that thing that visual artists can do, of like swaying the public and saying, "Look, this here's what I think. Maybe I can show you this, and you'll come around to the way I'm thinking, or maybe we'll have a meeting of the minds this way." It's basically their argument for why America should be involved in World War II. It's basically their argument for, we shouldn't be an isolationist country. What the Nazis are doing is terrible, and they're eventually going to gobble up America as well. And also, we should help all these people overseas who are being slaughtered, you know? And so, I mean, it's impossible for me not to look at that cover and see not just a superhero comic book cover, but also Captain America, even more than that Shield cover we saw, which I know the Shield predates Captain America, but the Shield cover, he's fighting these like nebulous looking robots. They could be anything. In the Captain America cover, is literally a guy dressed as the American flag is punching Hitler. It might as well say the American people on his chest like it would on a political cartoon. You know what I mean?
I think it says a statement not just from Simon and Kirby, but also from Martin Goodman, who was the publisher, that
Yes.
that he greenlit that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And big part of Marvel's brand, even back when it was timely, it was a fairly progressive comics publisher, at least for American publishing anyway. And I think this is them kind of saying what a lot of other comics publishers at the time refused to say.
Yeah.
So
I don't even know where this image is from. Somebody must know, but I think it was a Batman, Captain America crossover. But
Yeah,
Oh,
John
is this
Byrne.
one of those amalgam things from the
Yeah,
90s?
Yeah, it's John
and,
Byrne.
and
Yeah.
obviously I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm an American criminal lunatic. You mean that's not just some crazy disguise? I've been working with a Nazi. Now, of course,
It's like that. It's that scene from the Rocketeer movie. It's
Okay.
that. Do you know what I'm talking about? The mob boss. The mob boss has been working with Neville Sinclair, with the Errol Flynn style movie star who's secretly a Nazi, and
Right.
Paul Sorvino's character is a mob boss, and he's been working with Neville Sinclair, and Neville Sinclair outs himself as a Nazi, and basically Paul Sorvino's character says exactly what the Joker's saying. I may be a criminal, but I'm an American,
Now, of course, it's the Joker, so he's not consistent. So I think there have been portrayals where he's more sympathetic to Nazis, but this seemed relevant. Dino, so now we've been.
There's a great Ian Fraser short humorous story in his collection, Dating Your Mom. And I can't remember the title of it. I could find it on my shelves, but I won't give you the visual of me walking around my apartment. But I can't remember the title, but basically it takes place during World War II, and Hitler is talking to his inner circle. And one of them observes says what his real master plan is, which is to make Nazis the greatest plot device in the history of the world. Because anytime you want to have a villain, Nazi is just shorthand for the most villainous people on earth. And I've always thought about that whenever I see, things like this, especially Danny, when you said that, the World War II never ended in the Marvel universe. Because it's a great plot device. You can trot out the Nazis anytime you like.
Well, I always thought that I know it's Will Eisner week, but Jack Kirby, I think a lot of his comics were what I call PTSD comics,
Oh, yeah.
And let's not forget that he did a series
Yes.
called The Losers, he did
Incredible series, yeah.
an army comic called The Losers. I'm political, but I don't get too political in my comics. But when I do, it's stuff like this, COVID
Yeah,
Cop,
Yeah.
And I actually did a comic called COVID Cop in 2023 as a Kickstarter. And my recent Kickstarter is called Antimatter. And what Antimatter is, it's basically a one-man anthology of all my personal protagonists. And yeah, here's some. Whoa, hey, whoa! What you doing there? Oh, there's Antimatter. Okay.
That's
My
great.
Lord, that was a lot. And
That's
so
why I sent you that
basically,
email.
yeah, right. And actually, I just sent you another email because I forgot to send you something that might be important, and we'll get to that in a second. If you can pop it up, there's 3 images I sent you that is relatable to
Steve,
today.
you're giving me credit for more technical skill than I have. Can you just
I'm sure,
to the
or
camera?
whatever. But I'll speak about it. But if you go back to, I created a character called the Red Hook. The Thing is, everybody loves the Thing. So I had this character called COVID Cop, and basically what's happened is that the comic takes place 10 years from now when we didn't find the cure, and 2% of humanity is what's left. And what happened is, and this is where villainy gets interesting. Like, Thanos had an interesting idea. He's wrong, about, snapping his fingers and getting rid of half of people so that we would have more resources for people, but there's an interesting idea behind that, right? But it's wrong. But in COVID Cop, the government decided the worst thing to happen to planet Earth is humanity because of what we do to Earth. So that's right. We can kind of understand that, but not to the cost of killing people and letting a disease spread. And what COVID Cop discover is the antidote to COVID and all the diseases as they've progressed is to drink the water from the Gowanus Canal, which is worse than anything else. And if you can survive that, I mean, again, absurdity, right? Like you have to find levity in talking about this stuff. And then, so I'm not going to like tell you the whole story in the first issue, but the some of these people come out. This is like, his name is Major Fallout. This guy with the bunny rabbit and a chainsaw, like, I have a character called Admiral Amok, and like there is a stand-in for the president. There is a stand-in for other kind of characters of leaders and whatnot. And COVID Cop and his ex-wife Fate Majeure, he's trying to like rekindle romance while trying to save what's left of humanity. I think it would have made a good, like 2000 AD comic. And of course, this guy's screaming MAGA, as a MAGA monster. And, it's not so subtle. Sorry, guys.
It's great, though.
But it's a lot of fun. And again, it's a way to express and find some kind of humor and relief, and she wears the American flag as a cape. And then I had a character called Chestface.
He looks like
he looks like a tooth or whatever, but it's about a stand-up comedian who inadvertently gets experimented on, and they put his face on his chest and mutate him. It's kind of like my version of the Thing a little bit, and then of course there's the Thing, the Fantastic Four. I think Danny just wanted me to send some drawings of that. And then here he's
nice.
punched in the wall, and we got a Jewish star, like. And then I have a character called the Red Hook, where the premise was that Brooklyn is sentient, reveals herself to be sentient, and she's so heartbroken by the toxicity of the world that she decides to literally secede from New York, ergo America, to start her own republic where art can be bartered for food and services. So it's very hippy dippy. And I've been doing this Red Hook character, for years. There's also a pandemic of new heroes and villains that arise from that as well. And it's kind of like it's a little bit, socialism kind of stuff, and then we have, and then there's a lot of adventures that happen in the Red Hook. And what I sent you, Danny, was I drew a graphic novel called Cuba, My Revolution.
Right.
In 2007 or 8 or whatever. Vertigo published it, and I actually sent you some pages. I don't know if you can click on them and put them. Probably not swap out.
If I do that, I'll disconnect the whole thing. You don't
disconnect the whole thing. But it's in Verna Lopez's story that I illustrated, and she's an artist and a painter. In fact, I just saw her last week in Florida. But it's a great graphic novel about her wanting to be an artist, but joined Castro's militia, and fought in that, the Bay of Pigs and all that war and everything. And little by small, as everyone were leaving or trying to escape Cuba because of what was happening, she was like almost the last person to like get it and figure out, oh my God, I can't make art here. I need to go to America so I can express myself, and her escape, her eventual escape. And it's just this beautiful story that I had the honor and privilege of illustrating into graphic novel form. So, I don't know, ultimately, I think the best thing that comics do is to tell the truth through words and pictures, but of course there's other sides to and other feelings to these stories and these ideas, which I think are also important to read, so maybe we can understand other points of views as well. So I don't know, it's been a fascinating discussion because of I don't really approach the subject matter as much in my work.
Yeah,
I try to keep it small. Like for me, George Reeves' Superman makes the most sense. When he would grab a robber's gun and turn it into a pretzel, and then of course the powers just expanded and got bigger and bigger and bigger. But that comes with more responsibility and more culpability. Like, what is the job of a hero? And I've been questioning that in my work more recently than ever before. Like, what is the responsibility and why?
Thank you, Dino. So I have some questions, but I think maybe since it took about 4 hours to go through my PowerPoints, why don't I haven't been looking at the chat. I'm actually listening. But any good questions in the chat that?
Trying to see now.
Because there
many questions, more
commentary. Over 100 comments.
Yeah, comments.
Do people just, can people just ask?
Yeah, you can just
talk on the thing.
Just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a story you didn't include, Danny, that you may know. We have it in Rare Books. It's in an issue of True Comics.
Uh-huh.
I am proud to say that True Comics had Columbia faculty on its advisory board. But it's a story called There Are No Master Races. And it's basically a refutation of everything that Hitler maintained about what a master race was. And it's about equality and tolerance and everybody having equal right to have a equal life. It's great. It's very explicitly anti-fascist.
And what's it called?
There Are No Master Races.
Cool. Well, while we're waiting, somebody said that there are a lot of comments but no questions. So I know that most of them about how good looking we all are, but I have a question which, look, superheroes were them most famously, but there is a interpretation of superheroes as being a fascist fantasy. Anybody want to address that? And is it true, partly true, not at all true?
What's the question, Danny?
Are superheroes a fascist fantasy in general? The idea of might makes right.
I think Howard Chaykin thinks that, and I think he's not totally wrong. It's Batman is a complicated hero in question mark, like in quotes. I don't know, man. That's what I'm actually wrestling with in my own current writings about a superhero. Is that stuff like might makes right, or anti-bully, which is what heroes have been since the beginning of time. And and listen, and something we haven't talked about is that basically superheroes are invented by Jews,
Absolutely.
And there's nothing to wonder why.
Yeah. Exactly. That one we don't need to respond.
Totally get why. But
I think that
isn't it about like standing up to bullies? Like someone has to be strong to stand up for those who are weak.
Yeah.
It's not fascism. It's standing up, defending yourself.
Yeah.
One way.
I've got a comment here too. I think I figured out how to raise the hand and lower
Yes,
the
you did
hand.
raise your hand, Aaron. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I put in the chat an episode of the animated Justice League called A Better World, in which there was an alternate universe where the good old superheroes were not acting very heroic anymore. They took over the world. And it speaks to just the question Danny brought up is, what do you do with that power? What's the role of the power? And it showed just how easy the tipping point can be. The Flash on that Earth had been killed. And Superman and the rest of them got so mad that they murdered President Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor had been president. So even the art, life might have been imitating art. But the thing was that it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much, that they straddled that line between fighting for truth and justice and defending what's right and sliding into fascism. And I think it was a very disturbing subtext of that story.
The problem with superheroes is that there's no accountability. They don't report to anyone. They don't, no one has authority over them. But the way that I think they sidestep the problem is that the people who have become I mean, really, it's the difference between superheroes and supervillains. The ones who become superheroes are ones who really believe in goodness and decency and equality. And the ones who have powers who are bad are people who don't, or fascists.
Well, that's why it's a fantasy, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
exactly. So it's just that ability to have the power to do things.
I mean, look, there's nothing more terrifying than seeing the ICE criminals. You know, I mean, they were comic book supervillains, except they were real. You know.
Yeah, but I mean,
wearing masks.
Wearing masks.
Look,
masks.
I always had an issue with the whole question of, like, you know, are these proto-fascist characters? Are there? I understand what the argument is. I get that, and I think that in real life they would be, because, like you said, Karen, they wouldn't. There's there's no accountability there. And we see that in real life, like with these ICE goons, you know, that in real life people who wear masks and, you know, and try to play vigilante, they don't tend to be the good guys, you know. So
Isn't it funny that all those ICE guys who wear masks were the ones who were bitching so vehemently about wearing masks during COVID, when a mask could have saved somebody's life?
But you guys know who they're hiring for ICE, right?
Oh, the what?
What?
I mean, you're aware that all the people they're hiring for ICE are all the Proud Boys.
Somebody has their sound on and it's spilling over. If you're not talking, could you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Nope, still going.
Oh,
there it is. But remember, Trump said to the Proud Boys, "Stand back and stand by." The majority of the ICE people are former Proud Boy people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
Huge surprise.
Not getting enough coverage in the mainstream press, but that's the reality we're dealing with.
Lowering standards for hiring.
Right.
Man.
But look, and so, yes, obviously in real life that's very problematic. I guess what I'm saying is that the reason that I think it works to the extent that it works in superhero fiction, in comics, in superhero comics, is because it's a heightened reality. It's not, like Danny said, it is a fairy tale. It is not real life, and there is a difference. And so you're dealing with a separate set of rules there. You have to deal with some of the same rules of real life, but, you know, you are, like you were saying, Karen, the people that become these superhero characters, the way these characters developed usually, they're not that likely to be corrupted by it.
Right.
You know? So that's kind of the out there. And I think that there is a difference between between the superhero characters and just like a might makes right mentality. I think that might maybe wasn't true when superheroes were first created in the 30s and 40s, but now I think they're written in a much more nuanced way, where the writers are very cognizant of that issue, and that if they don't watch themselves, they are embracing a might right makes right attitude, and they don't want to do that. You know?
Yeah, when you look at, the first Superman story in Action One, the crimes that he's fighting are like domestic abuse and corrupt politicians and gun runners, and there's one other one that I'm blanking on. They're familiar crimes. They're crimes that the readership would have recognized from their daily life.
Yeah, that whenever I do a lecture and I talk about the golden age of comics, I describe the first year of Superman comics as being like Law and Order with capes and tights, because it is ripped from the headlines.
Absolutely.
And I think I know the other crime that you weren't able to think of. I think it's that someone's about to be executed
Yes.
for a crime they didn't
Yes.
commit, right?
Yes, he's trying to get in touch with the governor
The governor, yeah, for a stay of execution. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I knew there
Yeah.
was a thing.
There's a hand up from Kev J. Kev J here.
Oh, yeah. Kevin Dooley.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey. Hey, Danny. I had put into the comments about whether or not Marvel or DC, the big two, whether or not anybody could actually bring up these kind of stories, considering the corporations that they're under. Especially with DC now being taken over by Paramount and Ellison being in charge of that, whether or not they could actually.
Had no corporation DC reports too.
Yes, exactly. Or could they bring up fighting a major corporation? I mean, look what happened with Colbert and Kimmel for a short amount of time. Would they be allowed to do it, or would their corporate masters not allow them to do it?
It's a valid question, and it remains to be seen. But I think that also what's interesting about that too is that the Ellisons already own Star Trek. Star Trek is about as left wing as you can get, and as progressive as you can get as far as like entertainment IP. And so far, it's pretty much the way it's always been. I mean,
didn't somebody?
That happens with these.
Ari, I agree with you. Didn't somebody say recently, some politician, that Star Trek has become woke?
Yes.
Ridiculous.
Seriously. I don't know if it was Vance or somebody else.
Star Trek has always been woke.
Yes.
Oh my god.
And let's not go down let's not fall into the trap of like using the word woke the way that Trump and his cronies use it, where it's a pejorative term.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a good thing.
Yes.
And then in the black community for like the past 90 or 100 years, it has been a good thing, because you're supposed to be awakened as to the machinery of white supremacy that's all around you, and you're supposed to be aware of it, and that's what it means to be woke. And so it is a good thing to be woke.
Ari, you're echoing like a 60s disc jockey. It's great.
It's
I'm not
because
going.
people have their speakers on. So we're hearing ourselves through their speakers because they haven't muted themselves.
Okay.
Oh, is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Is it still, is it,
it's good.
It's better
okay.
now.
Well, I mean, that is a big question. I mean, that's with the, I was really rooting for Netflix. I'm sure there's a lot of things not to like about
me
Netflix,
too.
but I was rooting for them to get Warner's,
Right.
And then, well, look, Ike Perlmutter owns, he somehow had a lot of control at he owned it for a while, and now he's very active in Disney. I don't know, has the Marvel content changed, or is it still somewhat progressive,
I don't think it's changed.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gone more to the right, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Has there been anything daring at Marvel in the past since they took Disney took them over, in the comics, that is?
No, I don't think so. I think you have to go watch The Boys, to get the kind of,
Love
story
The
we're
Boys.
talking about.
Well, they're not exactly woke.
Exactly.
Any other questions out in the audience? Because I think we're getting close to 2 hours, so I think it might be.
Incidentally,
Any,
this is the story
oh, cool.
about. It's like a 6-page story.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool.
Anybody have any last statements, or because I think we have. Then I will thank everybody who came to check this out, and thank you to our wonderful panelists. I really appreciate it, guys. This was, I think if we went on for another hour, we'd solve all the problems, but unfortunately, we have to end it. So
My problems never get solved, Danny. We're never given enough time.
Exactly. So thank you, Karen, Charlie, Dean, Ari, Ben, Will Eisner, the Eisner Studios, and thanks a lot, everybody. Ben, you want to take us out?
Good night. See you next week.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay safe.
Bye.